Ada for not understanding and shutting my mom out after we were told the reason for their divorce. My parents are getting a divorce, and it feels like my world is slowly cracking open. This isn't some dramatic teenage rebellion against reality. It's a quiet, gnawing ache in the back of my chest that I can't shake, no matter how hard I try. The reason for their divorce, in my opinion, is so trivial, so petty, that it feels impossible to process. My dad wants to take care of my grandmother, his mother, an elderly woman who is frail, vulnerable, and in need of support. My mom, on the other hand, wants no part of it, so she filed for divorce. The sheer finality of it stings, like a cold slap to the face. I've tried to tell myself she has the right to end the marriage. I've tried to reason with my feelings, to swallow my hurt and look at the situation rationally. But part of me feels hollowed out by the idea that she could walk away from my dad for this. The part I cannot reconcile, the part that eats at me when I lie awake at night, is how she wants me to accept her reasoning, to see her choice as valid and understandable. I can't. I genuinely cannot look at her the same way anymore. How can I, when she is leaving him to carry the burden of elder care alone, simply because it wasn't in her plans? Because it wasn't part of the deal she made when they stood before each other and promised in sickness and in health, until death do us part? I try to imagine the thought process that led her here, the quiet deliberations, the internal arguments, the weighing of her dreams against the reality of my dad's decision. But every time I do, I hit a wall of resentment. My dad didn't make this choice lightly. I know that. He has always been the kind of person who steps up when he's needed. His love for his mother, though understated, runs deep. To him, caring for her is not a burden but a duty, a responsibility that comes from love and respect. And my mom? She sees it as an anchor, a tether dragging her away from the life she imagined. It's not what she signed up for, so she's walking away. I feel torn between wanting to respect her autonomy and being consumed by disappointment. How do I reconcile the two? How do I make peace with the fact that the woman who raised me to value family, to prioritize love and loyalty, is now turning her back on her own husband because she doesn't want to deal with this? It's like watching someone you thought you knew transform before your eyes into a stranger, someone you no longer understand or recognize. I've replayed their arguments in my head 1,000 times, trying to piece together the puzzle of their decision. My mom must have struggled with this, right? Surely, she didn't come to this choice easily. But even as I try to extend her that grace, the bitterness remains. She's leaving my dad to handle this alone, and I can't shake the feeling that it's wrong. Not just wrong in a moral sense, but wrong in a deeply personal way that cuts to the core of what I thought our family stood for. In the quiet moments, when no one else is around, I catch myself wondering if I'll ever be able to look at her the same way again. Can I ever have a conversation with her without this lingering in the background, without this invisible wall standing between us? It feels like a betrayal, not just of my dad but of me and everything she taught us. She's always been the pragmatic one, the one who valued independence and self-sufficiency. I remember her saying countless times that she didn't want to be a burden on us when she got older. "Don't put your lives on hold for me," she'd say, as if preparing us for some distant inevitability. But this isn't about her. This is about my dad, about his love for his mother, about a bond that shouldn't be broken by convenience or lack of desire. And yet, she's choosing to walk away. There's a part of me that wants to scream at her, to make her understand how much this hurts. But there's another part of me that's afraid to confront her, afraid that she'll stand firm in her decision and confirm everything I fear. So, I stay silent, letting the resentment fester like an open wound. I don't want to be the kind of person who judges someone else's choices, especially not my own mother. But how do I not judge her when her choice feels so cold, so callous? She's not just walking away from a marriage, she's walking away from the man who has always been there for us, the man who has supported her, supported all of us, without hesitation or complaint. The thought of my dad handling this alone breaks my heart. He's always been the steady one, the anchor in the storm. But now, I see the cracks forming in his resolve. He tries to put on a brave face, to reassure me that everything will be fine, that he understands where Mom is coming from. He doesn't want me to hold this against her. He wants me to let it go, to see her side of things, to move on. But I can't. I don't understand her side of things. I don't understand how someone can walk away from their partner when things get tough, when life deviates from the plan. In some ways, it feels like an unraveling of everything I thought I knew about love and commitment. I used to think marriage was about weathering the storms together, about standing by each other even when it was hard. But now, I'm not so sure. If my parents, who always seemed so solid, can fall apart over this, what hope is there for anyone else? It's a disillusionment I wasn't prepared for, a lesson I never wanted to learn. The worst part is the helplessness. I can't change their minds. I can't make my mom stay, and I can't make my dad let her go without hurting. All I can do is sit in the middle of their brokenness, trying to make sense of it all, trying to figure out where I fit in a family that suddenly feels so fractured. It's a weight I wasn't ready to carry, a reality I wasn't ready to face. And yet, here I am, stuck in the middle of their choices, trying to navigate a path that feels less like a road and more like a minefield. My dad keeps urging me to let it go, to try and understand my mom's perspective, but his words land like a foreign language I can't decipher. Let it go? How can I? My mind keeps circling back to this question, spinning in loops of confusion and frustration. He tells me she has her reasons, that she's thinking about their future and her own limits, that this isn't just about abandoning him but about preserving herself. He says it with so much conviction that I can't help but wonder if he's truly convinced or if he's just trying to shield me, or maybe himself, from the deeper pain of her choice. But I don't understand. I don't understand how someone could walk away from their spouse over something like this. My dad would never walk away. I know it. He's the kind of person who puts others first, who shoulders responsibility even when it's heavy, even when it's inconvenient. That's the example he's set for us our entire lives. So, when he tells me to see my mom's side, to empathize with her decision, it feels like a betrayal of everything he's ever taught us. And then there's my sister, whose opinion cuts through the haze of my emotions like a jagged blade. She says I'm acting like a child, that I'm being selfish and immature for clinging to my anger, for lashing out at our mom when she's only doing what's best for herself. Her words sting, not because they're cruel but because they come from someone who knows me better than most, someone whose opinion I can't easily dismiss. She tells me I'm refusing to see the bigger picture. Our mom, she says, isn't walking away out of spite or malice. She's walking away because caregiving wasn't part of her plan, because she's spent decades raising us, building a life, and now she wants to enjoy the years she has left. She tells me that our parents had dreams of traveling, of enjoying their retirement together, and that those dreams are slipping away because Dad is choosing to take care of Grandma. She says it like it's a matter of logic, like it's just math. One choice cancels out the other. And in her mind, it's unreasonable to expect Mom to stick around for a life she never agreed to. But how can I just accept that? How can I reconcile the idea that retirement dreams outweigh the vows they made to each other, the commitment to stand by each other even when it's hard? I try to push those thoughts aside, to hear my sister out, to find the reason in her argument. She says Dad should have thought about this before making his decision, that it's unfair to expect Mom to sacrifice her dreams for his. And maybe, just maybe, there's a part of me that can see her point. But that part is small and quiet, easily drowned out by the overwhelming feeling of betrayal, of disappointment. I wonder if I'm being unfair. Am I really acting like a child, as my sister says? Am I clinging to an idealized version of marriage, of family, that doesn't account for the messy realities of life? Maybe I am. Maybe I'm too wrapped up in my own hurt to see the truth of the situation. But even if that's the case, even if my sister is right, it doesn't change the fact that I feel like a piece of our family is being torn away, that my mom's decision is breaking something fundamental in our lives. And yet, as much as I try to hold onto my anger, cracks are beginning to form in my resolve. My dad's quiet acceptance of her decision, his willingness to shoulder this burden alone, makes me question my own judgment. He doesn't blame her. He doesn't resent her. If anything, he seems to understand her better than I ever could. He tells me that love isn't always about staying together at all costs, that sometimes it's about letting the other person go, about respecting their needs even when it hurts. But I don't know if I can be that selfless. I look at my dad, at the lines of exhaustion etched into his face, at the way his shoulders seem to sag a little more each day, and I wonder how he can be so calm, so understanding. Does he ever feel the anger that I feel? Does he ever let himself dwell on the unfairness of it all? Or has he simply accepted this as his reality, as the price he must pay for being the man he is? And then there's my mom. I think about her, about the years she spent raising us, about the sacrifices she made along the way. I think about the moments when she was there for me, when she was my anchor, my guide. It's not as though she's a stranger to sacrifice. So why now? Why is this the line she refuses to cross? I try to imagine what it must feel like to watch the life you planned unravel, to see the future you dreamed of slipping away. I try to imagine the fear, the resentment, the sense of loss that must come with realizing your partner's choice has reshaped your entire world. But no matter how hard I try, I can't quite get there. I can't quite reach the point of understanding that my dad seems to have. I can't quite let go of the anger, the sense of betrayal. It's not just about the divorce. It's about what it represents, about the values and principles that feel like they're being cast aside. It's about the feeling that our family is being divided, that the foundation we were built on is crumbling. And yet, even as I wrestle with these emotions, I can't ignore the small, persistent voice in the back of my mind, the one that whispers that maybe, just maybe, my mom isn't entirely wrong. That maybe her choice, as painful as it is, comes from a place of self-preservation, of refusing to lose herself in a situation she never wanted. It's a whisper I don't want to hear, a thought I don't want to entertain. But it's there, gnawing at the edges of my certainty, forcing me to confront the possibility that this isn't as black and white as I want it to be. And so, I find myself caught in the middle, torn between my dad's quiet acceptance and my sister's pragmatic reasoning, between my own anger and the faint glimmer of understanding that I can't quite bring myself to embrace. It's a battle that rages within me, a storm of conflicting emotions that leaves me feeling lost and unmoored. I want to believe in the strength of our family, in the idea that we can weather this storm together. But with every passing day, that belief feels more like a fragile hope than a solid truth. The more I think about it, the more I realize how much this is affecting the way I see her. She's always been my mom, my protector, the person I could count on no matter what. But now, that image is shifting, and I don't know how to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the woman she's showing me now. It feels like a betrayal, like she's choosing herself over our family, and I can't help but feel angry about it. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture. But it's how I feel, and I don't know how to change that. I think about the future, about what this will mean for all of us. Will my mom regret her decision? Will she look back and realize what she's given up? Or will she find happiness in her new life, free from the responsibilities she didn't want to take on? And what about my dad? Will he be okay? Will he find a way to balance his new role with the life he still deserves to live? I don't know the answers, and that uncertainty feels like a weight I can't escape. What I do know is that things will never be the same. The family I grew up with, the parents I've always looked to as a source of stability and love, are changing in ways I never expected. It's like watching a bridge collapse in slow motion, powerless to stop it, powerless to rebuild it. All I can do is try to find my footing in the rubble, to figure out what this new reality means for me, for my sister, for all of us. But it's not easy, and I don't know if I'll ever truly understand why this had to happen. I don't think it was an easy choice for my mom, and I can't ignore that part of me knows she truly struggled with this decision. But no matter how much I try to rationalize it, it doesn't make it feel any less wrong. She's leaving my dad to navigate an incredibly challenging situation all by himself, and I can't help but feel like it's unfair. It's not about her wanting to avoid eldercare, it's about abandoning the person who has stood by her through everything. The person who never once left when things became difficult. I've gone over this in my mind so many times, trying to piece together the reasoning that might justify her actions, but I always end up in the same place, feeling a mixture of disappointment, sadness, and anger. I know my mom has her own experiences shaping this decision. She grew up in an environment where caregiving wasn't just a duty, it was an expectation, a heavy obligation that often left people feeling trapped and used. Her own family took advantage of her parents, draining them emotionally and financially until there was nothing left. I understand her fear of falling into the same pattern, of sacrificing the life she worked so hard to build for the sake of someone else's needs. But that's the part I can't reconcile. Our family isn't like that. My dad isn't like that. He's not someone who would demand sacrifice without giving just as much in return. He's not someone who would expect her to lose herself in this situation. He's simply doing what he feels is right, supporting his mother in her final years. It's not lost on me that my mom has always made her stance on this clear. She's told us repeatedly that she doesn't want us to care for her when she's older, that she wants to spare us the burden she witnessed in her own family. And I respect that. I truly do. But this isn't about her hypothetical future. It's about my dad, who has been unwavering in his support for our family, who has always put others before himself. How can I accept her decision to walk away from him when he's facing something so difficult, something he's choosing out of love and responsibility? How can I not feel like she's abandoning him when he needs her the most? Over time, I've come to realize that this situation is more complicated than I initially thought. It's not just about my mom leaving or my dad taking on caregiving responsibilities, it's about the ripple effect it has on all of us. My sister and I are left to navigate the emotional fallout, caught between loyalty to both parents and the growing distance that this decision has created. My sister has been steadfast in her defense of my mom, insisting that her choice is valid and that I need to grow up and accept it. And maybe she's right. Maybe I do need to let go of my anger and focus on moving forward. But it's not that simple. Every time I see my dad, every time I hear the exhaustion in his voice or see the weight of this new reality settling on his shoulders, I'm reminded of how much this decision has cost him. In the months following the divorce, I watched my dad adjust to his new role as both caregiver and solitary man. He moved in with Grandma, turning their modest home into a place where her needs were prioritized. I helped him where I could, stopping by to run errands or just keep him company. I saw firsthand how demanding it was, how her needs seemed to grow with each passing week, how his days became a blur of medication schedules, doctor appointments, and sleepless nights. But I also saw his quiet resilience, the way he faced each challenge with a sense of purpose that I couldn't help but admire. He never complained, never expressed bitterness toward my mom for leaving. If anything, he seemed to have made peace with her decision in a way I still couldn't. My mom, on the other hand, moved into a smaller apartment and began carving out a new life for herself. She started traveling, just as she had planned, ticking destinations off her bucket list one by one. Occasionally, I would get postcards from her, filled with descriptions of breathtaking views and once-in-a-lifetime experiences. I'd read them with mixed emotions. On one hand, I was glad she was finding happiness, but on the other, I couldn't ignore the lingering bitterness. How could she enjoy these moments while my dad was back home, sacrificing so much? Over time, though, something began to shift. I started to see things with more clarity, not because I suddenly agreed with her choice, but because I realized that holding onto my anger was doing more harm than good. My dad didn't need me to carry his resentment for him. He was far too focused on doing what needed to be done. And my mom didn't need my judgment, She had made her choice and was living with the consequences, whether I approved or not. Slowly, I began to let go not of my disappointment, but of the weight it carried. I realized I didn't have to agree with her to move forward. I didn't have to understand her decision to acknowledge that it was hers to make. As the years went by, I saw my dad's relationship with Grandma evolve into something profound. Caring for her wasn't just a responsibility, it became a source of connection, of meaning. Even as her health declined, their bond deepened in ways I never expected. My dad found a quiet kind of fulfillment in those years, one that I don't think he would have traded for anything. When she eventually passed, I watched him grieve with a bittersweet mixture of sadness and peace, knowing he had done everything he could to make her final years comfortable and full of love. My mom and I eventually found a way to rebuild our relationship, though it was never quite the same. There was a distance between us, an unspoken understanding that we saw the world differently. But we found common ground where we could, focusing on the parts of our relationship that still worked instead of dwelling on the fractures. She continued to live her life on her terms, and while I couldn't fully support the choices she made, I learned to respect her right to make them. Looking back, I realized there was no perfect resolution to this situation. My parents made their choices, and those choices changed the course of our family in ways that were painful and permanent. But they also taught me something about love, responsibility, and the complexity of human relationships. My dad's unwavering commitment to doing what he felt was right showed me the power of selflessness, while my mom's decision to prioritize her own needs reminded me that boundaries are important, even when they're difficult to uphold. In the end, I've come to accept that people are flawed and complicated, and that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. My parents' divorce wasn't just the end of their marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter for all of us, one that forced me to confront my own beliefs about family, loyalty, and what it means to truly support the people you love. It wasn't the story I would have chosen, but it's the one I lived, and it's shaped me in ways I'm still coming to understand.